Hey,
Shell Daddy.
how you doing, Schmitty?
Doing great, man.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Schmitty. Welcome back to me, 5th of July.
5th of July, 2023.
Yes, what a wonderful celebration yesterday. It's never as intense when it's a weekday celebration. I mean, obviously, people got to work the next day. So it's still a great day. Great independence is what brought us to where we're at, kind of brings us to where we're at in this conversation, Schmitty. And I thought maybe we'd hit on one of your concepts, what divides us. And I thought maybe we could just kind of slingshot it, go from it, and say, pick a few topics and say, this is what I think divides us. You say what you think divides us, and we roll from there.
And why that's important.
And you
why is it?
Tell us why. Well, I think it's important, one, because there's several reasons it's important. The easiest way to control any population is to have a divided population. When humans are united together in any good common cause, they're it's very difficult to control them with false narratives and bullshit and lies, because everybody's in tune. Like in World War II, when we were united, it was tough to float nonsense to the public because everybody was hands-on. It was all hands on deck. And when everybody's united behind the same goal, with the same interest in mind, you can then still have internal legitimate dispute about ways we're going forward, but it's not the tribal hatred that one tends to get when we don't have an outside entity where we can unite against it. So
right, and I think probably in our lifetimes, what the closest we have gotten to that would have been the day after 9/11.
Absolutely.
And we don't need to get into what it was or what it wasn't, but to note that people were united, politics melted away, we knew something was wrong, people dropped the petty arguments, and we, for a moment in time, in yours and I's lifetime,
we were all Americans
we were all
again.
Americans again. And so for me, we have to acknowledge where we're divided now. We have to educate ourselves and others about how we've been divided, how we can be divided, and in the end, how that is not beneficial to us. It actually benefits other people, and we won't, again, spend time on pointing fingers at who the people are or why they're doing it. That's really not relevant to the mission.
But see, I have to disagree just in nuance with you, Shmini. I think we have to be, maybe not united, but there has to be argument of valid arguments. And when people are on one side, I mean, clearly you're not united with another person when you disagree with what they say. But I think what we're trying to get at is the ability to come together even when divided. Correct. So there is still going to have to be division, humans, but you're talking about an outside influence of division.
Right.
I'm just talking about there is always division with humans.
I'm talking about it as a mechanism.
To control.
As a control mechanism.
Yes.
And so, like, if you and I know that we're going to come and talk about 5 things we don't agree on, but we're trying to get a little closer to some agreement, we're coming in with friction in mind, but we have rules of engagement that we're going to have. And our goal is to not prove each other wrong, but to, in some way,
prove each other right.
Prove each other right.
I think that's a good way of doing it.
Evolve our brains a little bit beyond where we thought we were. And we need that at every level of society right now. And again, so just to kind of wrap that up, we're trying to unite people that are divided because we have things that are going on in the world that we can no longer be distracted from. Like, we have to be a part of the solution rather than being a part of the smoke and mirrors that goes on all around us. And maybe that's too nuanced of a word. I don't want to use conspiratorial words, but if you and I come in and we want to talk about having a solution for something and we get distracted by something that's out there, well, we didn't really get any closer to making or achieving our goal.
Right.
So, like, we have to acknowledge when those things go on. So for me, acknowledging where we are divided in society is as much of a education for ourselves and for other people who might not agree with us. We don't want you to agree with us. What we need you to know is we want to help solve these problems together. And to do that, we need to quit arguing over the little things that the media or a politician may use to just say, no, vote for me and I'll fix it for you.
Right.
You know, we that's clearly doesn't work.
Right. It's the pettiness that they like to. They know humans are petty. They know humans are humans. We all acknowledge that we have weaknesses and faults, and the buttons that these professional instigators of strife are able to push is, and they're. And I also don't want to get in this conspiratorial aspect, but it's these webs that come down from these ivory towers, Schmitty, that seem to infiltrate every aspect of society that in fact now that it calls into question are our basic freedoms. It really does. Like, are we really truly even free anymore than the way we were raised and taught we are? And one way to keep us down and one way to keep the powers that be in power is to divide us. And I think a good one of the starting points, Schmitty, is, like I said, politics. What a great way to divide us, politics. You got Democrat, you got Republican. You can throw the race card into it. You can throw the class card into it. You can throw the communist card, the conservative. I mean, you can paint every color of the spectrum into that argument. And it is the easiest cauldron and pot to stir for those that like to cause problems. What do you think?
100% agree. And I think the underlying thing that we need to talk about and think about in this is we need to have nuanced disagreements. So because you and I are going to come in here, and I have a feeling we're going to agree on a lot of things, there's going to be little things that happen along the way that are nuanced. And how the mechanisms divide us is you can't even have nuance in your argument. So we can have a debate, and someone may be so offended by one thing that you say that they're just going to call you a name and dismiss you. And therefore, so everything that you said prior to that is discounted,
of course,
discredited, canceled,
humans.
Whatever you want to call it.
It's humans listening to other humans.
And so, like, again, this is an education process for people.
Right.
It's we have to.
Please be open-minded when you listen to us, folks.
Through, right?
Don't turn us off. Everybody out there is going to have an opinion that we disagree with or agree with. Mm-hmm. I mean, every human being on the planet, everybody agrees and disagrees on something. So we all have something in common and something not in common. So there's that, right? I mean, we can all find something in common with other people. Go ahead, Shane.
I got one more thing. So part of the reason why the last few years has been so rough on us as a society, I believe, is because people are too afraid to really even start a conversation with something because of the cancel culture war that has been occurring. So it's important, and it's been happening. It's a lot of the podcasts that I think we both listen to that those people have figured out a way to reach escape velocity from being able to being canceled, whether that's moving from a platform that censors you because you said one word or dared to breach a topic that they was off.
They demonetize
you. So one of the things with this conversation is, again, just to educate people that it's foundationally important to be able, two people or a group of people, to sit around and have a conversation about the things that are bothering them in society, in their church or in their school or wherever it is that we are. We know we have a lot of problems.
Let's talk politics.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Here's my conceptually. Let me bounce this off of you. When Richard Nixon was the president, they pulled some shady shit. Everybody knows this. Nobody denies it, and he ended up resigning. Republicans and Democrats came down on him like a ton of bricks. The press was all over it. It was disdainful discuss. It was politics, and it was brought. A light was shined on to what politics really is. They broke in, tried to get information on somebody else. Fast forward to where we are today. That what Nixon did is nothing compared to what several candidates, like for instance, what Hillary Clinton did with the Steele dossier. That's proven. It's a fact that you can't deny it. It happened. There's been there's independent special counsel appointed. They've found this stuff to be factual. No punishment was ever rendered, but that person could have been president. Then we have a president now who we know has been found to be corrupt. There's proof bank statements. There's money transfers. There's conversations. There's investigations by the IRS. There's 1092 documents with the FBI. There's significant, the FBI came to Senator Grassley the other day and showed him all the stuff they had on it. There's 2 whistleblowers from the IRS that have said this stuff. There's tapes of Hunter Biden sitting next to President Biden talking to somebody in China about why their $5 million hasn't been sent yet. And he says, my dad's sitting right here and can make stuff happen. So that should concern Democrats and Republicans and anybody that's a journalist. And the fact that he hasn't resigned, and the fact that the news media hasn't turned on him, and the fact that the Democratic Party still supports him is evidence into and of itself that the shit is people don't care about ethics or anything in politics anymore. All they care about is my side's in charge, and we don't care what he does because we just want it to be our side. We want our tribe to be represented, not your tribe.
Yeah. I think the word that's always come to mind over the span of decades that I've been paying attention to politics is always the hypocrisy of it. And to shine the light on the other side, for the people that are Trumpers and that.
Well, I'm just going to hammer Trump next. Don't worry. Wanted to.
No. So I think you're pointing out one side, which is, people have been more passionate about loving Trump or hating Trump than any other time in our life with any president, right? And so as we've devolved and the conversations get harder, the censorship is happening, we see the mechanisms in our political and media apparatuses breaking down to the point to where you can point out so many hypocrisies in everything that you say. Then you add the layer of the Trump unit, the groups of people that are, I don't want to say militarized, but they're definitely more fanatical because they consider themselves patriots.
Right.
They're tired of seeing the status quo. Trump did call out the media from the beginning. So whether you like him or hate him, I feel like the work that he did to call out the media was worth the price of admission to me.
He did good, he did bad. And that was one of the good checks in the good column.
But moving that on, like he's under investigation still.
More than one investigation,
from
bro.
the Steele dossier,
I believe it's like 3.
Oh, it's just
like 3 indictments, separate indictments. It's insanity.
It's just dumb.
Yeah.
And so if you're just Trump's my guy, and I can see your lies right now, and the media is just ignoring it while they're pointing out something that, the documents that he took from the White House, which we could have a whole conversation as to whether what he did was even illegal. They're not having those long-form conversations because
it's tribal.
From what I understand, a president can declassify any single document that he wants to take and declassify.
Right.
He has the power to do that when he's a president. Well, Joe Biden was not president whenever he took the files that he had in his possession.
Right. Neither was Pence.
He was a vice president. Yeah. So there's all this stuff that we're just going to ignore, right? And so meanwhile, the people that are still fully engaged in the Trump.
And Sandy Berger took a document. Do you remember Sandy Berger from back in the day? He was the director of the CIA or the chief of staff or something, like attorney general. I mean, something in the guy. Sandy Berger took some paperwork that was secret out of the office. Boom, they charged him, indicted him. He lost his job and shit. right? Just one damn
because
document.
he's just a player in, in their game.
And he was kind of, I mean, Sandy Berger was like, had real pull. I'll look him up. Well, maybe we can type in later, this is what Sandy Berger was.
Sure.
But
show notes.
Yeah, I mean, my goodness.
So I think just to wrap that up, I think where we're divided is everything that you said is about Clinton, everything that you said about Biden, and I didn't need to get into any of the bad stuff that could be true about Trump because it doesn't really matter. What matters is we recognize there's hypocrisy there, and people are being divided because they see the hypocrisy and they're not allowed to say anything about it. And there's different rules for one side versus the other right now.
Right.
Like that flip could switch. That switch could flip. Next time.
Trump talks to Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine. They start an impeachment process, and Adam Schiff knew everything they were trying to impeach him on was a lie. It's been proved because he was briefed on all these things, so he knew they weren't true. Fast forward, Biden has a conversation on open mic where he tells somebody, I made them remove a prosecutor or I was going to stop them from receiving government money from the United States of America. Well, if that's not quid pro quo, what is? So if Trump did it or not, maybe he did. I've heard the conversation. To me, I don't know. I didn't think it was an impeachable conversation personally, but and I thought it was bullshit and they didn't do, I won't get into it. That's a huge rabbit hole.
Right.
The fact is they tried to impeach him and they went forward with the process and they did it pursuant to what the Constitution says they have to do. And they failed. So, I mean, it's a mechanism that's there to, it's failed before. Again, Andrew Johnson, it failed with the guy that came in after President Lincoln. They tried to impeach him, failed there too. So, I mean, people have tried to impeach presidents before and failed. But the fact that Biden gets a free pass for a quid pro quo that is in the open. It's there. So it's like you said, there's like one scale of justice for one person, one scale for another. And shouldn't Lady Liberty, isn't she blind, Schmitty? And isn't she just weighing the balance of the evidence? And then she decides without seeing color or seeing political, it's like, I don't know.
Well, I think
it's bothersome.
I think people that want transparency and just want rules and the rules to apply equally to all people. Like you don't get to make your own set of rules that you can abide by, and then we all have to live by something that doesn't. It's infuriating to many people from bottom to top. And you hit it on it again. That the thing with Biden was back when he was a vice president, and he was basically wielding Obama as his, I've got the power to do this. If you don't believe me, watch.
Right.
Well, all the stuff that people didn't want to believe about Hunter Biden prior to Biden getting elected, and his laptop, the famous laptop, those I think there was a messenger conversation, WhatsApp conversation with Hunter Biden, basically threatening to use his father's power in order, because I guess their money didn't show up on time.
It was Xi. It was talking to a guy from the Communist Chinese Party.
Yes.
And they were wanting to know where 5 million was. And it even says Xi, it says XI. I mean, the name of the
So how can we as society not be divided on stuff like that unless we're able to call out when it occurs and all agree that's not right, that's not right. One doesn't make the other less wrong. They're both wrong.
They're both wrong. And that shows a weakness inherently in our culture and our society, that we aren't teaching our children that wrong is wrong. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat doing wrong or a Republican doing wrong or a white man doing wrong or a black man doing wrong or an Asian man doing wrong or an Indian woman, right? I'm just saying we should not be basing decisions on politics or race or color or ethnicity. It should be right is right, wrong is wrong. When a politician takes millions of dollars to make a decision based on his own interest and not the interest of the United States, that's wrong. And one could even argue it's traitorous, but I won't delve into that. But at the end of the day, it's wrong. everybody should recognize it, Republicans and Democrats, and put their foot down.
Yeah, so our mechanisms of solving those problems that we see were captured by something. And there's a bunch of different influencers out there that are talking about it in different podcasts that I listen to very frequently. And everybody keeps trying to like put their finger on exactly how these things actuate the way they do. It seems like there's not coercion necessarily, that there's people out there, I think, talking about it in the back, about how they're going to get together and influence how things happen or don't happen. It just seems like it just happens.
Well, it falls in their lap.
So how does that?
Humans are humans.
Yes.
Well, like there's
humans are humans. I think there's a deeper point here from a division standpoint,
right?
Because our institutions, like growing up, I always thought that, and we hit on this in the intro video, if you watched the intro video, but whenever there were problems as we were growing up, we always could look to the media to call things out.
Yes.
Somehow that went away. We could look to maybe the next politician who is saying the right things, that we could hopefully elect that person, and they're going to be the actuator of,
right.
of calling that thing out and fixing it. When did that stop happening? I don't know, but that stopped a long time ago. Or the next election. Then the other thing we have is that little thing called the Constitution. Well, if the Constitution applies to some people, but not the others, like how does that happen? Like, so there's such a deep level of, I don't even know what to call it.
Well, it's a living document, so it's always going to be interpreted a little bit differently by each generation, Schmitty.
But how can the interpretation be different for different people, though? That's the thing. Like, you mentioned the different colors, the different sexes, the different races, all these things. Like, there should be a blindfold to that. Okay. It shouldn't matter if there's a D.
Well, let's say there's a decision, Schmitty, about abortion. That's understandable that it's hard to comprehend and relate to the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't talk about abortion.
100%.
So we have to figure out a way to funnel the Constitution into the issue of abortion and then spit it out as a way that says this is pursuant to the Constitution. But then you have cases like what we just had before the Supreme Court, where the president tried to use executive power and make a law, and only the legislator can make laws, and the executive enforces the laws, not vice versa. And somehow, some way, 3 Supreme Court justices felt that the executive branch could make laws. That, to me, is how is that possible? How can the Constitution say something and it's in plain English that everybody can read and interpret, and it's been read and interpreted over and over the same way for 200 years, and all of a sudden 3 people read it and say, no, the executive can. The fact that there wasn't an 9-0 decision, to me, Schmitty, comes right back to everything you were just saying. I mean, that encapsulates all the problems and issues, and the fact that people can allegedly be educated and allegedly be American citizens and can read a Constitution and spit back out to us that the legislator doesn't make the laws, the president does, man.
Yeah, so how does it fail? How does it fail so absolutely?
Yeah, how could that be?
How can our systems be so good and yet fail absolutely so often? And yet, I'm not here trying to preach saying we need to destroy our systems. What I'm saying is we need to acknowledge that our systems are not behaving the way they should, and we need real conversations to point out that when those systems at that level of society break down, the thing where rules and laws are made is the foundation of everything else on top of it. Like, so you got to go to the root. You got to put the finger on.
It's our culture.
You got to put the finger.
Our culture produces the people that run our stuff, Schmitty. Our culture has failed. Hence, our government is going to have people in it that aren't culturally sound and don't give a shit about what our culture is, and they want to be revolutionaries and destroy our culture because they don't believe in it.
Right. So
in essence, if you cook it down and boil it down and caramelize it, that's what you get.
So I agree.
Failure of culture.
And your and I's conversation and my mission in life moving forward is to call out these things for what they are And without getting conspiratorial, without saying this is Biden's fault or this is Trump's fault or this is your fault, it's not.
It's society's fault.
It's society's fault.
For letting our culture fail.
Rather than focus too long on it, I mean, we're going to focus more on things where we're divided because we're trying to teach people how we're divided so we can acknowledge it, so we can hopefully do better next time.
We want to unite the divided.
Yeah, unite those people that are divided, right? That's part of the mission, conceptually. Because if this experiment fails, I think it's going to be hard pressed to find anyone in our country who's taken seriously, or anyone in another country who knows that if the American experiment fails, the world will be lost to some kind of authoritarian, one world, communist style.
Oh, they want one
whatever
government,
it is,
brother.
Yeah. So again, that's a conspiracy.
No, I don't think that's a conspiracy.
It's not,
the United Nations exist, and European Union exist, and Macron and France. I mean, China, France, Germany, they all, at the end of the day, want to one.
I guess I want to clarify.
They've made that their public statements.
I agree. So I want to just clarify for the record for people.
Okay.
Anything that we say at some point could be considered a conspiracy theory to someone. Right. And there's talking points out there. There's going to be people that hear this and they'll try to write us off and say, well, they brought that up. So, whoa, don't pay attention to them. That's part of the game.
Right.
So we have to acknowledge that anyone listening to this may come in and say, well, I don't agree with that.
Right.
And that's great. So we're going to build a mechanism. Part of the plan that we have is where people can come together and put the questions, their hat in the ring or their red flag of, I don't agree with that. And then we're going to have to flesh that out.
Right.
Because what we need is a place that we can go that we can trust. And foundationally, where whatever podcast you listen to, if I'm assuming if there's someone's listening to this, they probably listen to some people that are doing journalism in certain areas that they're interested in. There's the Rogans, the Weinsteins, all these different people that are saying things. What people are saying is they're throwing things out here that where people are divided, and they're trying to educate people and unite people around conversations. Where I still feel like we're not doing a great job is everyone still kind of seems like they're kind of rowing in their own boat in a different direction. Even though they're acknowledging the same things, we're really not pulling that energy into a place where a person that doesn't have 3 hours to listen to a podcast might not have an hour to listen to you and me have this conversation. They just need a place to go that they can trust. And once they see that something's been built like that if they want to catch up to speed on something, they can maybe listen to a 30-second excerpt of, I just need to get up to speed with where we are on this particular topic today because I have to make a decision, or I'm going to go talk to this person that we haven't agreed in the past, and I just want to kind of come in a little bit armed, but I don't have time to go listen to a 3.5 hour Rogan podcast to pull out some thoughts of my own. So again, I think I just got into a rabbit hole a little bit. But the goal of this,
your rabbit hole caused me to have a thought that I had never had before that I'm going to speak to once you're.
No, that's really it. I mean, so the goal of this conversation is to get to the acknowledgement of the division that we see everywhere. Have those conversations and not just bellyache about it, but say, hey, people, we have a reason why we're talking about this because there's a goal, a battle plan to get to that goal, and that's something we're going to be sharing here.
And it just hit me that sometimes division has to be necessary and division is good. And I go back to the Civil War in the United States of America. We had to get rid of slavery, plain and simple. And the only way we were going to do it was division. There had to be abolitionists. There had to be fire breathers down south. There had to be a confrontation, a physical manifestation.
A line in the sand.
Yes, we can't have slavery in our country, and we're not putting it in new states. We're going to be cowardly at first, and we're just going to say you can just keep it in these states. But then when then Kansas, when we start expanding and get new states, then the South is going to lose its power because there's going to be more free states and slave states. So eventually it comes to a head, and we have to be divided. We had to be divided. We had to be divided on Abraham Lincoln, the greatest president, maybe the greatest American that's ever lived, even more so than George Washington. Abraham Lincoln held the country together and just was a phenomenal leader. But even Abraham Lincoln, I mean, we had to be divided to become what we are. And that led me to my thought of is like what they're doing in the LGBTQ community. Are they trying to like, is it like trying to divide us for a good reason or a bad reason? Or is it somebody else trying to get them to divide us? Or is it even division? Is it just humans that disagree on different things? Like Bud Light, Schmitty, if that isn't an attempt to divide us, and I'm sure tons of people don't want to hear us talk about that, right? I mean, that is, I'm sure, a divisive thing that people can't stomach. There's people that are so on each side entrenched that if you bring it up, they won't even sell the drink in a restaurant anymore.
Yeah. So
if that's not a divided society.
Here's what happened, though. I mean, so if we break this down to see how it happened and really get into where division occurred, I think most people that if you just sat and had a conversation with them don't really care what another person does in the privacy of their own home.
Not at all.
Okay. So as this thing has actuated, as many things do, which divide us in the end, is we don't care what someone does in the privacy of their home. When you start indoctrinating our children or forcing things that any individual, not me, any individual is not comfortable with yet, maybe that they don't think their child's old enough to really understand that, or maybe their child has some confusion in their own mind and they're looking to this and they came
but I think we have to admit, before we delve into that, we have to admit that this has been going on in society since Roman times.
Oh God, yes.
I mean, there has been and what is the nomenclature I should use without being offensive, Shmi? I was going to say, is transvestite, can I say that without offending people?
I think the trans community is
trans community of fair. I mean, and I want to be able to say this without offending people. So let's just say the trans community, and that's me worrying about it. When have you ever heard me worry about? I just wanted to say.
I'm going to write this. Can I write
that down? I just don't want us to like get kicked off of a platform for saying so. But the trans community has existed since Roman times, so we can't deny that this is part. It is. There's Greek writings about it. There's Roman writings about it. There is shit in Africa that whenever the Greeks and Romans went down to Egypt, it was probably a Greek influence in North Africa from Alexander the Great, but there was a trans community then. My point is, this is something that's thousands of years old. So for us to pretend that it's, I don't want to, and I'm not, I'm just saying it's been around for a long time. It's just the fact, I like your argument. Like, I don't want strippers stripping in front of my kids. I don't want sexualized people in front of my children. And I think a lot of that is sexualized, is I think where you're getting at, right? I mean, maybe not,
right.
But when naked men or naked women come around prepubescent children, I mean, to me, it's almost illegal. But be that as it may, let adults make adult decisions. Let children be children. But I just had to say that, Schmitty, because I have this argument with people all the time. They act like people think this is something new, and it's not. It's not new.
It's not new at all. And I think part of it is the evolution of our current society is you and I grew up in a very different world than what our kids are growing up in at so many levels of what they're exposed to.
But can't that be said about every generation?
Well, okay. So, yes. But we had 5 channels to choose from. And you couldn't.
And our grandparents had none.
And you couldn't say poop, I don't think, on.
I don't think you could. You certainly couldn't say shit.
No way.
No way.
I mean, you would never be on television again if that was your thing. So how things have changed is I think we grew up with a certain thing, and we've evolved out of that.
What was publicly acceptable then?
Did they call it conservative broadcasting? I guess would be the term for it. Where now basically everything that you would want to hear or see is out there all the time.
Right. But
what parents, and again, where I feel like this breaks the barrier of that is when children are exposed and any parent has the right to protect and guide their child to what they feel they need in their own timeline. And when those things start expressing themselves through corporations, through diversity, equity, and inclusion
but
movements,
the Supreme Court has said that that's freedom.
No, that's
of
fine.
expression.
No, that's I'm not arguing the fact that it's a freedom of expression. I'm arguing why it got so divided so fast.
Okay, my bad.
Because it's people saying, I don't want to be, exposed to this. And rather than getting on television and saying Bud Light needs to be canceled or Bud Light needs to be sued or I'm going to sue Bud Light, what did they do? They opened up their Bud Light and they poured it out and they didn't buy anymore.
Right.
It's the ultimate expression of freedom of speech without saying anything. And so when that happened, then they're calling people bigots. They're calling people these names because, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, you still have to give the people that don't agree with the trans community or how it's coming in front of us with our kids. You should still have the right as a parent, make a steel man argument.
Right.
You should have the right to. I don't want to see the stripper right now. My 4-year-old doesn't need to see that. Cover your ears.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later. Whatever age you determine when that you cross that barrier, right? So I only want to say it that not that I agree with either side, but I can understand why people have a reaction to that and why that the Dylan Mulvaney thing became a thing and Bud Light got canceled. It's because they don't want it forced upon them or their children without their consent. Right. And so how do how can you ever solve that? Because ultimately that is a conversation. They're having a conversation without saying anything, right?
Right. And it is the division that is the division. And you said it. It's like this, the term, it's like you say somebody's bigoted, right? Not you, but this general concept of, one side says because these Christians believe a certain thing against our beliefs, they're bigoted. But isn't the same thing of the LGBTQ community is bigoted against Christian beliefs because Christian beliefs oppose their belief. So there's these two entities that are divided and they can't meet in the middle. So they both want to call each other bigoted just for having beliefs.
And you can't say it because you're not part of the community.
Right.
Either side of the community. You're not even supposed to talk about it.
Right. And
that's
how
another point of
often
division.
in my entire life do I care what words I use? But even I am hesitant to say words because I just am not in tune enough with it to know what in the world is acceptable. It's like, my goodness gracious.
Yeah, and for me, I always caution to get into the rabbit holes except to make a point.
Right.
Because I don't feel like that necessarily solves any problems, you and me talking about it.
But it is showing what division is.
The point of showing a division is the thing for me.
Right.
And then how can we avoid that moving forward?
And isn't that a good way for somebody that wants to control people? Because let's be honest, conservatives, Christian stuff is usually a right-leaning aspect, and LBG, the pride movement is more left-leaning, if that's a good, left-leaning and right-leaning. And if you want to make them further divided, my God, just have them clash over the things that they can't meet in the middle about.
Yeah, and put them on a red team.
Because it's faith-based things. Like they're both faith-based. They really are. I mean, it's maybe not faith-based in a religious sense, but they have faith in what they believe, both sides. And man, those are the hardest ones to find common
They're
ground.
all categories that we get
But
put
then there's
into.
Also people over here that are religious, and there's people over here that are gay.
Like, listen, you,
right?
you and me can agree on 99% of the thing.
Right.
And I don't know of anybody that agrees on 99% of things, but let's just have the argument that you and I could agree on 99% of things.
Yeah.
If someone could go to that 1% that we don't agree, and I think this actuated during the pandemic, like people that were all on the same teams for most everything else, it became vaccine, no vaccine.
Right.
And people would hate each other because of that, even though they agree with 99% of the things.
Right.
And you couldn't even have the discussion.
Or abortion. Abortion's another one.
There's
these topics, like you said, that one. It's like you said, if people are watching this and they hear one thing they hate, they may never watch us again because we said that one thing that's their topic.
So we delved into politics a little bit. We delved into sex a little bit. What other things would you like to touch on in the world of division? And again, the goal of talking about how we're divided in this country is not to blame anyone else. It's actually the opposite. What we're trying to do is unite people around the idea that in order for society to get any better, we have to quit being divided over I don't even want to say small things or silly things, because any topic, anything that someone is truly offended by, and there are some very offensive things out there, then you're going to be passionate about those things. And we want to inspire people to have conversations with other people under the guise of, we're coming to the table on a mission. And it's to have these conversations. We haven't talked about it at all a lot, but our technology is advancing at such a rate to where we're going to be organizing conversations at a much higher level, meaning you and I's conversations will be indexed and talked about, and we can pull this information and advance the conversation in a more organized, clean way moving forward, and hopefully move us closer to some kind of a uniting around truth seeking, or the least wrong truth of any given topic. So we all come in under the same rules and axioms, meaning we're passionate about certain things. I don't agree with everything that you agree, but we can't be divided on everything, and we can't be put onto teams and in categories because, you believed heavily in one thing and I don't believe as much in it. Right. So, where else do we kind of go into at this point? Or did you have something you wanted to finish up in the political division or the trans community division? Any kind of summary?
I think to summarize it, I just think it's all division, and then you can always go into abortion, you can go into slavery. You can, I think slavery, for instance, slavery, they still use slavery to divide us. No, that's, it's just never been taught properly. Nobody really understands. I suggest everybody out there in the wide world of sports, go look into the actual history of slavery. Get on YouTube, watch some videos, just learn something about it, and then talk intellectually about it. Then maybe we won't be so divided.
Well, let's tap on that.
Sure.
So, say what you just said real quick about slavery and the fact that people need to educate themselves on it, because I think
slavery started many thousands of years ago.
No, let me say it.
How do
this
you
a
want me
little
to
better.
talk it, Schmitty?
So, the truth-seeking apparatus, the goal for us is to have a think tank that sits people around the table that may or may not agree on what slavery is, the history of it, where it started, who's most guilty, who's less, how did it get here? Why are we more or less to blame than where it started and where it happened in other countries? So to me, I think these are the types of points where we need to circle back around. People should be passionate about going and learning more about slavery. And if they want to do that, there's so many videos, there's so many things, and you need to listen to both sides, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The goal for us, for me specifically, and you're learning about this in some of these conversations, is the truth-seeking apparatus, which is we have to be able to study history, to hear history as far as through the eyes and the words of people we may not always agree with. And then we need to have a place that we can go and have conversations and advance what is the closest to truth or the least wrong truth, right? So you hear, people that will disagree on, and America is to blame for slavery. I mean, all you have to do is look at history and know that it's been going on forever. 3
seconds of research would disprove that nonsense.
Correct. And so then the point, it was worse here, or it was
think how much better slavery was here than in the Middle East. In the Middle East, every man that went into slavery was castrated. They have no ancestors. None. You don't have ancestors once you can't reproduce. Over here, everybody was able to reproduce and have ancestors, and there's now millions of people alive who have great lives as a result of a terrible thing. But what was more terrible? To make it so people can't reproduce, or I don't know. To me, it's crazy. The fact that millions and millions and millions and millions of men from Africa were taken to the Middle East and taken to India and taken to places all over the Indian Ocean and castrated and turned into eunuchs. And nobody ever, most people don't even know that happened. And that happened for 1,000 years before Portuguese started buying slaves. The first Europeans to buy slaves from Africa were the Portuguese. And there was already a huge system in place. They didn't go down there and invent it. They went down there to big slave farms and bought them from Africa, right? They didn't go in and take them. So there was a whole system in place to buy slaves already in Africa, to sell them all over the world. So this concept that America is to blame for slavery.
Well, it's another dividing point, right?
It's easy to divide us on.
It's easy to say if you're not open to the idea, then you're racist or you're whatever.
Right. I'm sure tons of people just watched that and said, my God, Toby Shaw's racist.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't believe slavery's a bad thing.
But at the end of the
day,
there's zero doubt that slavery was terrible, and of
course it was.
Out of all the stuff that's going on now, there's a new movie out that's talking about childhood slavery and how that is still a big business in our world.
360,000 kids go missing every year in the United States of America, Schmitty. Did you know that?
So we're divided, and we're having debates on whether reparations in California are needed when no one living in California was ever a slave, because slavery was illegal in California from its onset. But we still have to get to the root of where the truth is. Like I'm going to tell you right now, Toby Shaw, I'm not opposed to reparations for things that have happened in the world. I'm not.
Okay.
I'm open to it.
Right.
If we're going to do that, we're going to have those. We need the data in front of us that we need to understand the whole picture, because are we going to give reparations to Group A? Well, such and such happened to Group B, and where's that? Where's that going? Why is this one more important than the other? So if we're going to have the real conversation about spending the money and saying we're going to make this right by doing this, we need to be building that on a solid foundation of truth as much as we can be there, right? So circle it back around. It's like this: the truth-seeking apparatus is a place where you and I say we disagree on reparations, but we agree that slavery was terrible, or we agree that whatever. We want to educate ourselves to a point to where we can come to a table, have a conversation on it. And how would we do that? Well, hopefully we would pull information from the smartest people on the planet who are passionate about the history of slavery and where it came from, all the different nuances of it. And we can agree in saying this apparatus is going to give us all the nuances kind of in a bubble here. There's going to be outliers that we can agree and disagree on, and we can have conversations on it. But we should be able to come here and say, okay, here's where we're going to start.
Right.
Because
and then people that want to know the actual truth can come and see what is the closest thing to the truth.
We're going to get divided before we get to the meat of doing anything.
But the problem is, Schmitty, and is that some people won't even care what the truth is.
But yeah, you can't fix that.
Right. Because it's humans.
The axiom I think of that is you can't fix stupid, and I'm not calling anyone stupid, but like if you choose to not educate yourself on something,
that's stupid.
That's
and if you choose to ignore bona fide evidence,
the point is, if you open your mouth and you state an opinion, and you're not willing to have that opinion turned back to you, and say, educate yourself before we have this debate. We need a place where people can go and say, if you want to have a serious conversation, there's this apparatus out there that I believe it gets us closest to truth seeking that we can get to. And if you're not willing to commit to that, you're a troll. You're just out there saying things, and we're not ever going to get rid of those people. But we have a plan on the apparatus basically that helps weed those people out. Right. Yeah. So people that come in and just throw a bomb in the middle of it, and they're giggling as they're leaving because they just caused division. We got to figure out a way to stop that as best we can. Now
with reparations, cool topic, Schmitty. I like this. This is kind of delving off a little bit. Like reparations, I think like somebody that actually should have to pay reparations would be the German government to Jewish people that they killed, because that was a government-run destruction of humans. No other way to say it. The government approved of it. The government directed it. The government provided the manpower, the money, the institutional ability, the logistical ability. I mean, A to Z, Z to A, the German government, the Nazi German government, did it. Slavery in the United States was done by individuals, some with the approval of the tacit approval of their state governments. The federal government did, unfortunately, count slaves as, was it 1/3 of a person or whatever they were counted on for constitutional reasons for your congressional district. They were counted as population, but obviously weren't free. So there was that aspect. But the Northwest, there was an ordinance in 1787 that prevented slavery from being in the Northwest. So even in 1787, our government said, no, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So slavery existed before the start of our government. Before there was a United States of America.
We didn't start it.
We didn't start it. It was there. And listen, when
it was everywhere.
Listen, when Cortez came to America with the Spanish to take over the Aztec Empire, the Aztecs owned slaves when Cortez got there. So this misconception, this fallacy, this mythological belief that there wasn't slavery in North or South America before the introduction of the Europeans is absolute nonsense.
Yeah. So I think this hits on the next topic. I'd like to talk about the division aspect, but it's also the solution. And you mentioned it as education. The fact that some people are divided and passionate or angry because slavery occurred is 100% understandable.
Totally
understandable. The problem that we have is that our systematic education of how things occurred have changed, and there's no context. It seems the political apparatus to me has captured the educational apparatus, and only certain narratives and certain history is allowed to be taught. And I think at the end of the day, for me, it all comes back to education. Politics only happen the way they happen because civics have not been taught properly from an education perspective. And if we can fix things with children, that's the only way ever. And I'm not saying we're going to brainwash children. I'm not saying I'm a left-wing person or a right-wing person and I want to control the education book, the curriculum.
I just want to control people to learn to control their own thoughts. Is that a thing to do? Educate people enough that they can have their own thoughts?
Critical thinking.
Yes.
The ability to have conversations about that. And children especially, because we have become soft because we've been strong for so long, they have no concept of the struggles that occur in history, the ups and downs, the implosions of empires because of how things happen.
Well, you just said it. It's the way they educate. They just teach you a little bitty thing. Like if you would, like instead of just teaching about American slavery when you teach slavery, how about teaching worldwide slavery? Because American slavery is just a little bitty component of the history of slavery in the world. And then if people were educated on the fact that, my God, humans have had slaves since there was humans and still have slaves now. I mean, there's still slavery. There's modern day slavery every single day. But just teach it as it is, Schmitty.
The great thing is, Shazi, and I say this in the intro video, that the last few years was rough, but it also was very exciting, and there was a silver lining to it. Whereas a lot of people were raising red flags and creating podcasts, reaching escape velocity and having these conversations. Now we've got filmmakers and actors that are coming out to stand up against the dogma and against the narratives that they can and can't talk about in Hollywood. And now there's I don't know the name of the movie offhand, the one about childhood, about slavery, the slave trade of children.
Is it the one that just came out?
Freedom.
With James Cazale?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's the most pre-sales of the movie.
Yes.
They were trying to pre-sell 2 million tickets, and I think they sold over 1 million pre-sale tickets. So pretty ambitious.
The reason why I brought that up is just because these narratives there's now conversations and there's education that's happening outside of
What's a natural
control
pushback in
mechanism.
Hollywood?
It is.
Right.
It's a pushback, yes. The Sound of Freedom, maybe. Is that what the Sound of Freedom?
It could be. But
So-
I think it's a natural pushback once, if anything gets too far to the right or too far to the left, there has to be natural pushback. Be it an industry, a culture, a society, a government, be it Hollywood, Bollywood, whatever. Whenever something gets too much, there's going to be pushback. And Hollywood at the end of the day is capitalism. And if you keep producing stuff that loses money, somebody up top is going to push back financially with no ideologue other than capitalism, Schmitty, right? So there's the capitalists running shit too. So we have ideologues. We've got, left-wing nut jobs and right-wing nut jobs, both. But they're both there. And they're both trying to put out shit that's pretty outrageous, but it's still art, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's art. If somebody's going to pay to produce it and do it and people pay to go watch it, they do. But this societal pushback is what we're seeing. People are supporting things financially because of belief and ideology.
Well, I mean,
that's not the way entertainment used to be, Schmitty, right? Entertainment used to just be, I want to be entertained.
Here's the thing. If you want to solve slavery, you have to stop it. And it's going to ruffle some feathers, but it never stopped. And now
I don't know if you can stop slavery.
There's a lot of conspiracy about this trade of human trafficking that is occurring everywhere, and there's
Eastern Europe, women, sex slaves,
the whole the whole Epstein thing, that
all the shit.
No one's talked about
Pacific Rim, everything in Indonesia.
So until and you said what you said. How do you ever stop it fully? I don't disagree with that, but you have to have a plan. It's kind of like trying to solve problems that occur by people coming across the border illegally, whether you're pro open immigration or not, the problems occur.
Yeah.
So if you're going to complain and try to solve the problems that are occurring because of that, you kind of have to fix.
You have to try to fix it.
You have to try to stop it from occurring.
If you really believe something, you have to try and fix it, even if it's not fixable.
Do you really care about those people?
Right.
Do you really care about slaves?
Yes.
Do you care about children? Do you care about whatever? So
you have to try and fix it.
You have to try to fix it,
even if it's unfixable.
Otherwise, you can't make reparations for something that's never ended.
Well, you can't stand on your soapbox and say I want to do good shit and I'm against something, and then just say we're not even going to try to fight.
How do you put the value on something that never ended?
Right.
It's still an open door.
Right.
And so, there's things that actually have to happen. But so for me, just to circle back around, education as a division point is basically it has to stop. And part of the truth-seeking apparatus for me is a place for people to trust, a place for hopefully where their kids can trust and their kids' kids can trust. Because the mechanism itself will be owned by all people, and it will not be owned by a corporation or monetary influence from a government. No censorship.
Right.
I mean, it's an open platform for people to go and trust in I think people are lacking hope because there's no light at the end of the tunnel saying, I can see all of this failure around me, but I can see there's a potential solution to where it can start getting better. Not
faith.
Fix it.
It's faith in different things, Schmitty.
Solve it right out of the gate.
Doesn't it all come back to we've had this discussion? There's always going to be a faith-based interest in truth.
Yes.
Not a religious faith. I'm not talking about that.
Humanity.
I'm talking about a faith in what people say and you believe it. It's like the monetary institutions of the world claiming to have value that we know they don't have, but we have faith that some made-up piece of paper is worth what they say it's worth. And everybody on the planet believes it. And if you can get people to be like they are with money, with if we can just get people to believe how important it is to educate people, I don't know. I don't know how to tie that in with money, Schmitty, but my God, everybody believes in money. It's the only thing in the world that everybody believes in. I've thought about it many times. It's like a real religion. So divide us with education, as you said, Schmitty, and you can divide us with education at the lower levels. You can divide us at the higher education levels. You can divide us by supplementing or implementing your own books or history, or I want to teach kids some bullshit civic stuff that has nothing to do with American culture or past. So I just start putting these books out, and kids start learning them. And then people want to get rid of books, and you just say they're book burners.
Okay, so yes,
I'm giving examples, which I don't think we've done much of, but look at all these ways you can divide us.
Well, and we haven't touched on it at all. We haven't said the word, and the word to me is problematic at a lot of levels, and it causes a lot of people. The reason we probably didn't say it in the beginning is because some people would have stopped listening. The word tyranny is something that we have to understand, and we have to understand it because I think the excuse me, the COVID pandemic happened, and without talking about any of the stuff that was right, wrong, fact or fiction about the narrative and about the disease and about potential cures, what we witnessed was an absolute tyrannical push by a group of bureaucrats who were not elected, and yet they were able to push some kind of button, some kind of mechanism, and start the shutdown of the globe. And so one of the important things for me out of this is we have to acknowledge where we're divided. We have to understand when we see things out there occurring that, oh, what's this attached to? Because as we're distracted and divided and talking about reparations or this, that, or the other, there's this other apparatus.
One hand's doing something.
Power. There's this other thing that can happen at any moment. And there's the reason why these topics are important to me, and we need to talk about the economy and banking. We need to talk about climate and
border control. My gosh.
Just imagine what happened with COVID and overlap any one of these things that could be called a natural disaster, call it something happens and the temperature jumps to, whatever. I don't know. What actuates the next event that, what actuates the next global hammer of tyranny that similar to what we witnessed in COVID?
Schmindy, they took away freedom of the press. They took away freedom of expression. They took away freedom of religion. They took, instant, like the most basic rights that you have as an American citizen. They stopped people from being able to gather and go to church. They stopped people being able to report journalistic endeavors. We even did a show, folks, earlier. I'm not even going to say the word. We mentioned a type of medicine, and we were immediately taken off YouTube, because we even talked about it. Now, so you can't talk about certain medicines. You can't go practice your religion or not, whatever your preferences are in religion. They weren't letting you do your preference. And anybody that said shit that they disagreed with, people freely expressing themselves, they shut down. They wouldn't even let them be on platforms. Like the government, the U.S. government entity, the FBI had a plan in place where they communicated with Facebook and said,
and Twitter and
these people, and take this stuff down. So they took away freedom of expression. We lost freedom of press. We lost freedom of religion. That is probably that's why I've been so down in the dumps, Schmitty, because I thought what we had was real. And one worldwide pandemic, I guess it's not a little thing because it was worldwide. That sounds silly to minimize it the way I did, but just one instance of one moment of unknown and a lack of clarity because we didn't know what was going on, and poof, all the shit that we think is ours and all the freedoms that millions of Americans have died for, poof, no more. Some bureaucrat. It reminds me of the scene I hate to go delve into movies, but when in Star Wars where Palpatine is up there talking and they lean over to Amidala and they'll be like, enter the bureaucrats. I mean, enter the bureaucrats. I maybe even shouldn't say his name. I don't want to get in trouble for saying their names. But, that's what I'm talking about, Schmitty. It's kind of disheartening, but at the same time, it's enlivening because we know that we have these problems and we can discuss them. And we are in a society that you and I can talk about this and put it out, and there's not going to be anybody coming, kicking in the doors and dragging us off like there are in other places in the world. So we haven't we haven't gone that far down.
We still have a silver lining because as far as I know, there's not people in other countries that have the platforms and the capability to just sit like this and say the words that we just said. So
let's wrap it up, and I'd like to just end it on saying I believe it's Abraham Lincoln, but, united we stand, divided we fall, Schmitty.
Till next time, Shalzy.
Till next time, brother. Have a good one.